In the year 1600, more than 150,000 samurai gathered in a misty valley in the heart of Japan. They came from every province of the country. They served two rival masters. And by the end of a single day, Japan would never be the same. The battle fought here would determine who ruled Japan, not for a year, not for a generation, but for the next 260 years. To understand Sekigahara, you need to go back just 2 years. For most of his life, one man had held Japan together by sheer will and brilliance. His name was Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Born to a peasant family, he had risen to become the ruler of an entire nation, the man who finally ended Japan's century of civil war. But in 1598, Hideyoshi died. He left behind a unified Japan, but not a stable one. His only heir, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, was 5 years old. And around that child stood powerful warlords, each with their own armies, their own ambitions, and their own vision of what Japan should become. Into this power vacuum stepped the man everyone feared. Tokugawa Ieyasu, the most powerful warlord in Japan. Patient, calculating, and ambitious in a way that made even his allies nervous. One man saw clearly what was happening and decided to stop it. Yoshida Mitsunari, a senior official in the Toyotomi administration, believed Ieyasu was using the young heir as cover to seize control of Japan for himself. What happened next was not inevitable. But it was always going to be violent. In the summer of 1600, Tokugawa Ieyasu made a move that looked like a military campaign, but was also a test. He marched his army northeast to deal with a rival warlord, Usuji Kagekatsu, leaving the western half of Japan behind him. Yoshida Mitsunari saw his opportunity. With Ieyasu away, Mitsunari began assembling a coalition in the west, calling on lords loyal to the Toyotomi name to join him. He issued a list of 13 crimes committed by Ieyasu. He gathered an army. He moved to stop Ieyasu from ever returning. Word reached Ieyasu on the road. He turned his army around. What had begun as a northeastern campaign was now a march toward the most important battle in Japanese history. Before the main armies met, the western forces attacked Fushimi Castle, a Tokugawa stronghold guarding the road to Kyoto. Its commander, Torismo Totada, held the castle with fewer than 2,000 men against an army 10 times that size. He held for 11 days. Then he died defending it. The road to Sekigahara was already paved in blood. By the summer of 1600, Japan had split into 2 sides. On one side, the Eastern Army, led by Tokugawa Ieyasu. His forces were experienced, disciplined, and backed by allies who had been rewarded generously over years of careful politics. On the other side, the Western Army, nominally assembled around Yoshida Mitsunari in the name of defending the Toyotomi legacy. Their coalition was larger on paper, but they faced a problem that would prove fatal. Not all of them actually wanted to fight. This was not simply a war between 2 armies. It was a war between 2 ideas. Who had the right to rule Japan? The answer would be decided not in the council chambers of Kyoto, but in the fog of a mountain valley in the middle of the country. Sekigahara was not a random choice of battlefield. It sat at the center of Japan's most important road network, a narrow mountain basin where the routes between eastern and western Japan were forced through a single geographic bottleneck. Control this valley, and you controlled the road to Kyoto. Control the road to Kyoto, and you controlled the political heart of Japan. The Western Army arrived first and took the high ground. Yoshida Mitsunari set up his headquarters on Mount Sasao to the north, giving him a clear view of the entire valley. His plan was to surround the Eastern Army as it entered the basin, forces on the hills to the north, south, and west closing in like a vice. On paper, it was a strong position. The Western Army held the high ground on 3 sides. The Eastern Army approached from the east along the valley road. Tokugawa Ieyasu positioned himself at the rear, commanding, watching, trusting his front commanders to hold the line while he waited for the moment he had planned for. One commander on the southern heights had not committed to either side. Kobayakawa Hideyoshi, 18 years old, commanding 15,000 men on Mount Matsu, had already sent word to Aiju before the battle began. He was not going to fight for Mitsunari. The question was, when would he move? Dawn on October 21, 1600. A thick morning mist blanketed the valley of Sekigahara. For hours, neither side could clearly see the other. The soldiers of the Eastern Army could hear the Western Army in the fog, the scrape of armor, the whinnying of horses, the distant murmur of tens of thousands of men. Then the mist began to lift. The battle began sometime after 8 in the morning. The Eastern Army advanced into the valley. The Western Army held its line. And for hours, the outcome was not clear. Yukita Hide, commanding the Western Army's center, fought back hard. Otani Yoshitsuga, a brilliant general who was dying of illness and had to be carried to battle in a palanquin, managed his forces with remarkable skill, holding his position on the southern flank. At his command post east of the valley, Tokugawa Ieyasu received reports from the front. He remained calm. He had not come to Sekigahara to gamble. He had come because he already knew how the battle would end. Above the battle, on the slopes of Mount Matsu, a young commander watched the fighting below. His name was Kobayakawa Hideyoshi. He was 18 years old. And he commanded approximately 15,000 men. On paper, Kobayakawa belonged to the Western Army. His men were in position to support Ishida Mitsunari's flank, a powerful reserve that could tip the battle decisively. But Kobayakawa had already made a decision before the battle began. He had sent word to Tokugawa Ieyasu. He was not going to fight for Mitsunari. Ieyasu had been waiting for him. The plan was simple. When the moment was right, Kobayakawa would bring his men down the mountain, not against the Eastern Army, but into the Western Army's flank. But Kobayakawa did not move. Minutes passed. The battle raged below. His men stood in silence on the mountain. Ieyasu waited. Mitsunari watched. No one spoke of it directly. But everyone on that battlefield knew. Everything depended on what that young man on the mountain decided to do. Then, at the decisive moment, Kobayakawa moved. The mountain erupted. 15,000 men charged down the slope. Not toward the Eastern Army. Toward the flank of the Western Army. In a single moment, the shape of the battle changed. Otani Yoshitsuga's forces absorbed the first shock, holding longer than anyone had a right to expect. He had known Kobayakawa might betray the Western Army. He had prepared a contingency. But he was dying, and 15,000 fresh soldiers against his already exhausted line was too much. And Kobayakawa was not alone. The sight of the betrayal triggered for other Western commanders who had also been waiting for a reason to switch sides. They turned on the Western Army at almost the same moment. With the southern flank gone, the Western Army began to break. What had been a controlled battle became a rout. Units that had fought hard all morning suddenly found themselves surrounded on 3 sides with nowhere to retreat. Otani Yoshitsuga, surrounded and his line destroyed, ordered his own men to take his head so that it would not fall into the hands of his enemies. He died on the battlefield of Sekigahara? Loyal to the end to a cause that had already been decided. Yukita Hide fought until his forces were shattered, then fled. The Mori forces on the Western Hills, the largest reserve in the Western Army, never entered the battle at all. Held in place by their own internal conflict. Ishida Mitsunari, seeing his army destroyed around him, abandoned his command post and fled into the mountains. By the late afternoon of October 21, 1600, the Western Army had ceased to exist. The Battle of Sekigahara was over. Tokugawa Ieyasu moved swiftly. In the weeks after Sekigahara, he redistributed land across Japan, rewarding allies, punishing enemies, restructuring the power of every major lord in a way that made another challenge to his authority nearly impossible. Lords who had fought against him were reduced, relocated, or destroyed. Lords who had supported him were given new domains, but placed carefully, surrounded by Tokugawa loyalists. It was not just victory. It was architecture. Ieyasu was building a system designed to last. In 1603, 3 years after Sekigahara, Tokugawa Ieyasu was formally appointed shogun by the Emperor of Japan. He was the first shogun in over a century to hold genuine power over the entire country. He then immediately resigned, passing the title to his son, making it clear to every lord in Japan that the position of shogun now belonged to the Tokugawa family. Not to whoever was strongest. To the Tokugawa. Permanently. From his new capital at Edo, the city that would one day become Tokyo. Tokugawa Ieyasu and his descendants ruled Japan for more than 2.5 centuries. No civil war. No invasion. No conquest. The longest period of peace in Japanese history. Built on a single day of battle. At Sekigahara, victory did not belong only to the strongest army. It belonged to the man who understood patience. Who understood fear. Who understood ambition. And who understood, better than anyone else on that battlefield, the value of a well-placed betrayal. For Ishida Mitsunari, Sekigahara was the end. He was captured in the mountains weeks later. Executed in Kyoto. For Tokugawa Ieyasu, it was the beginning of a dynasty. This was Sekigahara. The battle that decided Japan. This has been the Bushi Files. Until next time, stay curious.